This is a great slide from Hans Rosling. If you haven't followed him or looked him up online, you should. His talks are great and very worth listening to. Bottom line is the world is getting healthier. I don't have the dynamic graphic here, but he shows a beautiful graphic of 1950 to 2005 and showing how the world, everybody's moving towards higher income, hopefully, and much, much better life expectancy. And a lot of it is a result of the drugs and devices, which are a result of the clinical trials that got them there. There are some places that are not doing so well, sub-Saharan Africa and otherwise, and those are bucking the trend around the rest of the world. That said, drug development is now getting slower. And there's multiple reasons for this. There are a lot of good drugs out there for certain diseases. So if you want to show a new drug, you have to show it's better than or has some superiority over a conventional therapy. Otherwise, why would it be there? Statistically, trying to show something that is better than placebo versus better than an already successful treatment is a much harder problem. So it becomes harder to get drugs through to the clinic approved. There are other reasons. It's becoming a lot more expensive to get drugs approved. So people tend to go after blockbusters rather than small things. So bottom line is that drug development is slowing. Even though we've had spectacular success, drug development is slowing. And there are some spectacular shortfalls in what we have. Let's take Alzheimer's disease. I mean, $30 billion has been spent in 30 years since amyloid was first talked about in Alzheimer's disease. We still have a limited understanding of how amyloid interacts. In many ways, we have a lot of understanding compared to before, but it hasn't made an impact on us. In some ways, this problem is really big and really important. I mean, if you think about Japan right now, 41% of the population has either heart disease, oncology, or Alzheimer's disease. That's a very large percent. Alzheimer's can bankrupt an entire nation. And yet we have very limited understanding, and I'll talk about some of the reasons why we have such a limited understanding of Alzheimer's disease trials, and amyloid in particular. Now, a lot of great work is also taking place, and a lot of progress is also happening, but I think we need to think about this, and I'll quote some of the people who have talked about this and their suggestions about how this may be improved with better, smarter clinical trial approaches in the future. Moving into the future now, I'm going to talk about 3 different ways the future might be impacted with clinical trials. There's a lot of other ways we could talk about. I'll talk about these 3. Let's start with adaptive trial design using advanced statistics. I've kept the statistics out of the slides, but for 2 reasons. 1, I'm happy to talk about them, but 2, I am not a statistician, and very quickly statistics goes into arcane details that are very important, and I would feel remiss about talking at length about them. That said, currently the way clinical trials are, let's just do a clinical trial. You go in, you say, I'm going to put some people on a placebo, some people, you're randomized to one or the other. The ratio may not be 1:1, it may be a different ratio, and you say, here's my endpoint, and you run, oops. you run the study, and you get to an endpoint. You do the statistics, unblind who's in what group, placebo or control, and you see if it was successful. That is a long time, and it may not work that well. What might be nice is to do a number of interim analyses along the way. Let's say you're testing 4 drugs, and you do a few interim analyses, let's say every 3 months, and you have some biomarkers that give you a slightly early signal that one drug might be more effective than the other. Why should you be randomizing to treatments that are not succeeding at that point? You might want to put more people in the treatments that are likely to succeed based on the interim analysis versus the ones that are less likely to succeed. That's called an adaptive design. There's a lot of complicated statistics that go behind those designs, but those designs enable us to really do things like determine the dose level. If the dose level is low, you can raise the dose level. You can make that decision. You may make a decision to how to treat the next patient appropriately. It makes it also really good because if there are some therapies that are not working, that are actually having a toxic or harmful effect, you can stop that portion of the trial. You can increase the number of people in the group that's having a beneficial effect. And if you can quickly see it's having no benefit over standard of care, why continue the trial? It's better to stop it. So these are all some of the benefits that happen from adaptive trials. So you start collecting the data, you establish rules up a priori, because you have, part of being a good scientist here is establishing these rules a priori, that what you're going to do in what circumstance. You analyze the available data, you look if it meets those rules. If it meets those rules, you either stop the trial if it meets the stopping rule, but if it doesn't, you reallocate the people accordingly, and then you continue the trial. Here's what it means for us. So you have a patient group, which we all know we're all very unique, very heterogeneous group of people. For some of us, this is the beginning of what personalized medicine might provide. The drug might be toxic, but beneficial for some group people. For some people, it may be toxic and not beneficial. You definitely don't want to touch it. The others, it may be not toxic and not beneficial. And the final, the last group that you hope you're in is it's not toxic and beneficial. Now, let's think about this from the point of view of rheumatoid arthritis and biologics. There are a number of great biologics out there in rheumatoid arthritis. All of them have shown to be successful in a roughly 30 to 40% of the people who use them. You've got 6 possible options. They work in 30 to 40%. I mean, I'd like to be able to know which one I'm in. This is what the new statistics and the clinical trials approaches that we're talking about now are going to be able to enable us to do. Either while proving a drug is successful in the first place, or once these drugs are on the market, proving which one is right for which type of person. This is important because you will now know maybe I can have a blood test which looks for this particular substance, and if I have this, I should be taking that drug instead of the other ones. This is the future, one of the futures of personalized medicine, and adaptive trials are a pivotal first step to get to that final dream of where each of us can get the drug that is appropriate for us. A really big study took place, and I'll just talk about this in a little bit of detail because it's important to understand what this means. So let's take a traditional trial. This is from the Wall Street Journal and Dr. Berry. A traditional trial, let's say in oncology, might recruit 40 to 60 patients in phase 2, try and get a signal of efficacy, see if it works, and once they decide that it works, they would then go ahead and do a 3,000-odd patient phase 3 clinical trial. Note, your success rates, even in that circumstance, are at best 30 to 40%. Your alternative is to say, if I have 5 or 6 possible solutions, let me all test them against each other with an adaptive designs. And the ones that are working, I'm going to put more patients in those groups. And the ones that are not, I'm going to pull them out. You need more patients at the beginning. You need roughly 120 patients per group. But then you need far fewer people in phase 3. Your likelihood of success is much greater. Very different way to think about things. The statistics are very complicated. The FDA has spent a lot of time thinking through how to do these. We're seeing more and more of these sort of trials taking place now. The impact on all of us is going to be very profound because when these trials come out, we're going to have better drugs with better biomarkers associated with them that we know ultimately are going to lead to more personalized medicine. A second element of all of this, why is it that not everybody's doing it now? Try and get 5 pharmaceutical companies to put their drugs in a head-to-head study with each other. What do you think is going to happen? They're not. And I want to talk about some work, and a lot of credit here goes to Dr. Chas Boudra, beautiful presenter as well. If he ever comes, I'll be in the audience, and I hope you all are as well. There's a couple of slides of his slides. He really points out, start from the Alzheimer's things, and I'll recite a story that I've heard him say a couple of times at talks. He was at GSK in 2000. He found a particular molecule that could serve as an analgesic. He decided to run some trials. They went and did animal studies, ran some human studies. They found that it didn't retard pain, so it was not an analgesic, and it raised your body temperature, so it was hyperthermic. They discontinued it. They never published it, never told anybody. Fast forward to 2005. He's at a conference. There are 60 new biotech companies focused on that molecule. Fast forward to 2010, there are still 15 new companies, multiple NIH grants being written on that molecule that finally in 2011, AstraZeneca runs a trial. They show it's not an analgesic and it's hyperthermic. How many billions of dollars were wasted? How many brilliant minds were spent to repeat that failure again and again and again? There aren't that many targets, and many companies are following the same targets with slightly different formulations and are not sharing the results because it's a competitive advantage if somebody else is spending money on X and not on Y. To this end, there has actually been a real revolution on this, and I think the credit goes to a lot of academicians who have noticed this problem and have been rebelling against it for a large period of time. It goes to the NIH, which has really fostered data sharing amongst genetics and genomics. It goes to the internet, which has created a much more open space of information and created a fundamentally different way to think about how information is shared and transferred. So NIH now, for example, if you do genomic work, a lot of the work has to be available to the public. It's available. You can go online. Any one of you can download it. I can't interpret all of it, what it means, but we can definitely download it and have it available. Dr. Bhutra just started a group out of Oxford where they give away all the reagents and give away all the findings and the molecular targets to everybody. And his point is, I'd much rather stop the trial early and share information at that point, then let the biotech companies figure out the best delivery mechanism, the best distribution. There's still a business. There's still IP to be had, and you'll get rid of all of these failures. There's a very profound change happening here, and a very exciting change. And I think this change has the potential to really, instead of us spending $30 billion again on Alzheimer's, with 6 companies having variations of the same drug and same target, to have the potential to have much more progress made. This is becoming very common. The Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative was started by one of my mentors, Dr. Michael Weiner, where there was a public-private partnership, and they imaged thousands of patients, some with mild cognitive impairment, some with Alzheimer's disease, some with no disease but high risk factors. They drew blood, they got the images, all are available to anybody. It's a very different way of doing research than the silos we've worked in now. So this is a really big change that's happening in the near future, or is happening today, that might transform our lives even 10 years from now, not 50, but 10 years from now. I'll talk about a few more things. I'll talk about patient-centric and patient-driven trials as one of the last areas which is new. And this is an area where, as mentioned, I've worked on in the past. I think many of you are familiar with traditional trials. You find a number of sites. You find a number of physicians in the site. The physicians usually recruit from a local area because nobody wants to travel, unless it's a life-threatening illness. Nobody wants to travel more than 50 miles to take part in a clinical trial. So right away, if you have 10 million people who are eligible for a trial, who have a disease, you're already funneled in with the eligibility criteria. You have to be under 65 or over 65 or whatever other criteria. Then you're funneled in because you have to be located close to the sites. And then you're funneled in to get your 200 participants who actually match the trial. So you have 10 million people. By the time you're actually trying to find it, you only have 20,000 people to engage with. It becomes really difficult to recruit for a clinical trial. You don't have that many people. I mean, we have new technology. Why not do this? Why not just have people located everywhere? Now you have 10 million people. You still have these eligibility criteria, but you've got 10x people to try and recruit. You can't do this for all trials. If it's an oncology trial, if it's a really dangerous trial, if it's toxic medications, you don't want to do this. You want the physician close by. But if you're looking at following up for 5 years for risk of heart disease after a drug has been approved, the acute event, infarction or otherwise, does not occur when they're in the once-a-year physician visit for the trial. It occurs somewhere at home. Why not run this remotely? This, by the way, is telemedicine. This is not a new concept. It is a difficult concept, though, because there are a lot of state rules. You know, in the US, the states drive a lot of the medical establishment. So when we tried to do this, we found 12 states, only 12 states in the US. This is with FDA approval. This is with a large pharmaceutical company. This is with an already approved drug that they just wanted to try again with this technique. We found only 12 states would let you do that. So this just tells you that this is a rapidly evolving technique. Now, that said, patients are taking this into their own hand. Patients are starting to run their own trials this way. There's actually companies out there, Transparency, for example, which is trying to recruit directly from patients, volunteers, raise the money, and run the trials this particular way. The solution is it does allow you to get a wider recruitment funnel. You can verify a person's identity online. I mean, we all do banking online. It's not that hard to verify your identity online today. And it's very participant-centered. Why do you want to go to a hospital when you can do a lot of the things remotely? A nurse can visit your house. A phlebotomist can visit your house. So when we ran this trial with Pfizer in 2010. This is the infrastructure we needed. It was an overactive bladder study, so we needed a computer, a webcam, an internet connection, and a phone. And we needed a peripheral, something to measure how much urine came out, a physical device. That is what we needed. Fast forward to today, only 3 years from 2010. I don't need any of that. That's all I need today. It's a big change. I mean, and technology is moving even faster, so this is becoming easier and easier and easier to do. I had to worry in 2010 how people were going to get internet connections. Now I just provide them with an iPad or a pad of some form, tablet of some form, and we're all done. You do online informed consent. Now, this sounds easy, but it actually, to clinical trials, represents a very profound shift. I mean, if you've all been to a doctor's office, even today, most of them have tons of files of paper sitting at the back. They're not used to this. The more advanced ones have an electronic data capture or electronic medical record, but those are terribly designed. If you ever see what your doctor has to enter, you will feel very sympathetic towards your doctor. They're not designed to be user-friendly, let alone for a patient to enter data or somebody at their own house to enter data. So you have to take a lot of the revolution taking place in the internet and the user-friendliness, and that has to be ported to this approach. It won't work without that. That's happening. That's happening throughout this country, and it's happening throughout the world. These trials are starting to take place.